You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Brine, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. Most people, when they are looking at the dairy industry in Ontario and Canada, think about the dairy cattle that are black and white, the Holsteins, and of course the idyllic view of them grazing out in a field, and it's very romantic for most people. But if you go back far enough and you look at a lot of the pictures from 100 plus years ago, you're seeing animals that aren't black and white, but brown. And a lot of those animals were Jerseys. My father and my mother had a herd of Jerseys when I was very young, and my dad loved his Jersey cattle there. For me, it's a little bit of a soft spot. I was brought up with the idea that Jerseys were the preferred breed. Today, we're going to be talking with Krista Cressman. She is the General Manager of Jersey Canada. We're going to talk a little bit about the Jersey breed in Ontario and in Canada. Krista, welcome to the Back 40.
Thanks, Mike.
For people who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about who Krista Cressman is and tell us a little bit about what Jersey Canada does?
I would identify myself as being a small town Ontarian. I grew up in a small town in Waterloo County, which is right in the center of a very productive and highly agricultural area. I've always been surrounded by that. And I didn't even realize the joys and the blessings that come from being in that and inherently learning about agriculture just by virtue of going to school with kids who had farms and visiting them and playing at their house. That's always been a part of me growing up. Along the line, a variety of different paths has led me to here, being at Jersey Canada and working as their general manager.
What is Jersey Canada's role in the industry then?
Basically, we are an organization which is authorized to represent a specific breed of animal. So any organization can form, the Purple Pony Club could form, and they could apply to the Minister of Agriculture at the federal level to be incorporated and become a representative of that breed. There is only allowed to be one organization representing a specific breed. So Jersey Canada is the representative of the Jersey breed in Canada, and we have been here since 1905. Our organization sets the standards for what constitutes a Jersey animal, and we are also responsible for maintaining what we call the herd book. So for non-agriculture people, that is a listing of animals and their pedigrees, so who their parents were, who their grandparents were, and maintaining that register. And we have done so for many, many years.
So the Holstein breed in Ontario has been the dominant breed for quite a few years. There's some major differences between what a Jersey cow looks like and a Holstein cow looks like. For our listeners that might not be familiar with those differences, tell us what makes a Jersey cow special.
Besides just being really, really cute.
Yes, besides being really cute.
Jersey cows are significantly different in that they are much smaller in stature. They are about a third smaller. So it's really hard to imagine what 1,400 pounds look like, but that is about the size of a full-grown Holstein. On the flip side, a full-grown Jersey cow is going to top out at about 1,000 pounds. So there's a significant size difference there. So they're not as tall, they're not as bulky, they're significantly smaller. They also are different in terms of coloring. So they can go anywhere from being a soft brown to being a very dark brown. One of the distinguishing features is that they have a black nose and a light whitish ring around their nose as well. And they're well known for their beautiful, soulful, dark brown eyes and long lashes. So everybody, if you're thinking of what does a Jersey cow look like, think back to all of those advertisements for, I think Borden actually had a Jersey cow in their advertisement. Daisy in the States, that's a pretty brown Jersey cow. So they were definitely the cows of choice in the early days, dating back to in Canada. They came here in 1868, and people often talk to them as being their house cows. So families, would have a house cow, and that was their cow for their house milk.
They're a very mild-tempered animal as well, aren't they?
They are. They're mild, but I think what stands out about Jerseys is cows in general are pretty mild. They're herd animals, they're fairly docile. But what's kind of unique about the Jerseys is they're kind of mischievous, they're curious. And so they're much more interested in what is going on around them. And often you'll hear Jersey farmers talking about, having to double latch their gates because Jerseys are curious and they'll figure out ways to unlock the latches on gates and that sort of thing. They're a little bit more curious, a little bit more personable and people oriented.
My dad always talked about the temperament, and of course, he loved the beautiful look of the animals and the size, of course, being smaller, they're much easier to handle. But he also talked about growing up. At that time, they kept a Jersey bull on the farm, and this particular bull had had the horns removed. Dad said he really, really liked getting his head scratched, particularly between his ears and around his ears. And all the time he was doing that, he was trying very, very hard to get your hand caught between the pen partition and what was left of his horn. Even though they're mild-tempered, they're not necessarily something that you just take for granted either.
No, Jersey bulls are known to be quite ornery, more ornery than the average bull I've heard. But I think realistically, we also have to recognize that there's no such thing as a bull that you should trust, I guess is what I would say.
Oh, I would agree with that.
I think there's this misunderstanding, and it's not just their temperament, it's their size. People who are non-farm people just can't appreciate that if this 1,400-pound animal or 1,000 pounds, it doesn't matter. It's still a really sizable animal. And if they decide to be stubborn or cranky, you as a human are going to get pinned. And I don't think that there's many people out there who've worked any time in ag who can tell you that they haven't had a run-in with an animal in one shape or another. So yeah, I wouldn't trust a bull regardless once they get beyond a certain point.
Yeah, we have to keep in mind, we talk about the Jerseys being a smaller animal, but they're still 1,000 pounds. That's a lot of weight there. You get them to move at their discretion rather than yours. You can encourage, but that's about all. They're going to go where they want to go.
I think too, what's really neat that really sort of sends home to me, those early roots is that if we forget, we think about agriculture in current terms, in terms of a herd. But when you think back to the early days, people were subsistence based, right? What you produced was for your family or maybe your neighbor. And who was responsible for caring for cattle? It was the wives. It was a female task. And so if you think about a Jersey being substantially smaller, it would be perfect for a woman to be handling because women are generally smaller in stature. And so that was definitely part of the appeal of a Jersey is that they were smaller in stature. They were, sweet. They were more biddable and were more easily handled by the woman and making a perfect quote unquote house cow.
Now, there's more differences to them than just the size. The feed efficiency and the actual milk that they give is significantly different from what you would get out of a Holstein cow.
It is. It's really fascinating, actually. And if you think about it, you don't see Holstein chocolate, do you? You
No.
see Jersey milk chocolate. And that's because the butter fat is significantly higher in a Jersey cow. And that's a natural thing. That is not anything you have to do changing feed. If you gave, a Holstein and a Jersey exactly the same feed, you are going to get a different milk from the Jersey cow. Firstly, you're going to get milk that tends to be higher in fat. So the difference can be over a percentage point higher per liter of milk in fat. And the protein in Jersey milk is higher than it is in Holstein milk. So, your components, what makes up the milk besides water, is significantly higher. So you get a thicker, creamier milk. And if you ever have the chance to head down just south of Brantford and go to Little Brown Cow, they sell chocolate milk there that will just knock your socks off. It's Jersey milk and they use real chocolate in it. And honest to goodness, it's like a milkshake in a bottle. It is just so delicious and so creamy, but you really get an idea of just how creamy and thick Jersey milk is.
Yes, I've had that. It really spoils you for what you consider to be chocolate milk. I'm too far away to go and get some on a regular basis, which that may be a really good thing. I'm not sure on that.
Mike, it's a pandemic field trip.
That sounds like a plan.
Forget winery tours, chocolate milk tour.
So if we go back to the late 60s, my dad came in from the barn one day and said, let's sell the cows. And my mom was really supportive. She said, I'll get the number of the auctioneer. He always joked about that. I know he was feeling very tired. There's a lot of work involved in running a dairy operation. But there were some other things going on at that same time. And he was very concerned about supply management coming in. And some of the things that were going to be implemented, he felt he was going to have difficulties competing. And that's even though he had a herd of Jerseys that was producing over the all breeds average in Ontario at that time. What were some of those changes that came in when the Milk Marketing Board came into being?
Well, I think we have to think of it in terms of a bigger picture. Agriculture was really changing. That was just before what we talk about the Green Revolution taking hold in North America. And basically the productivity levels of agriculture, doubling, tripling. It was a real changing time period, and sort of what we think of as the romantic old school agriculture was ceasing to exist. And it was a much more production for shipping to larger urban communities because urban communities were growing. The pooling of milk and the milk board is what was happening. And so up until the mid 60s, people were supplying very specific processors. And so there was a real market, a niche market, I guess, in some ways, where people were able to choose Jersey milk. And so Jersey producers were sending their milk specifically to Jersey branded milk processors. And so with milk pooling, which is what we have now, basically when you're a commercial producer, all of your milk is picked up by the milk trucks and it all goes into a central pool and is mixed accordingly. And so that was a big change. And so for Jersey producers, you have to remember Jersey cows smaller. And so that means they're going to produce less in terms of volume. And at that point in time, what they were moving to was a system where people were allowed to produce a certain volume of milk and they got paid on that volume of milk. And with Jerseys producing less milk, it didn't matter that their milk was more rich in nutrients, was richer in fat and protein. The volume was less. The difference between a cow that produces 20 liters and a cow that produces 30 liters is a significant amount. And on a volume basis, the attractiveness of a Jersey farm wasn't as high. That was a real change. And so we went from having a record registration year in sort of the peak of our registrations previously, might I note, of about 12,000 registered animals in 1963, I want to say. It wasn't until just this past year in 2020 that we once again reached that peak. So there was a real drop. Despite that drop, there were many producers who still kept a few animals on. There were some producers who still were, all the way Jersey breeders. There's nothing to say that they disappeared. That has happened. There are breeds of cows which almost disappeared and are just starting to come back. We didn't ever experience that in Canada with Jerseys, but in Canada, they definitely lost their shine to the same extent. There were always those who were Jersey all the way, but with the payment system, it just wasn't as advantageous. And at the end of the day, farming's a business.
Yeah, I know my dad always wanted to be part of the brand Jersey Milk, which was an actual brand in stores. That's where he felt he could really, really make some money at that. And he hadn't got a contract for that yet, but he was working towards it. And of course, when we started talking pooled milk, that all disappeared. With the amount of work that he was putting in, he felt to compete, he'd have to go to Holsteins, and he wasn't willing to do that. He'd be pleased to hear that there's been a resurgence in the breed, that a lot more Jersey cows in Canada. What's behind that resurgence?
There's many different things, but I think if we talk about it in terms of a business sense, they make great business sense. We have changed our payment system in Canada since the 90s, and it's not volume that farmers get paid on. What we don't think about, we think of milk as being this white liquid, but we forget that a really large percentage of that milk is actually water. What we talk about in the industry is we talk about components. So what makes up that milk? And so that's what farmers get paid on. And people hear discussion about, well, there's quota for this and quota for that. Well, all the quota is basically a license to produce a certain amount of butterfat. Farmers get paid on their butterfat. So if I have 1 kilo of butterfat, if I have a Jersey, it's going to take me a lot less milk to produce 1 kilo of butterfat than if I have a Holstein. If I have a smaller animal with a smaller physical footprint that produces less manure to manage, is an easy to handle animal with good health, has great reproductive health, it would make sense all of a sudden, this Jersey thing seems like a really good deal. And so that is definitely part of why Jerseys are resurging at this point in time. Another big part of the resurgence of Jerseys has happened in Quebec. We saw a real surge in registrations in Quebec, and a lot of that is due to Quebec putting in rules around phosphorus. And so phosphorus is a byproduct that comes with manure production. And we know all across Canada, we have rules for manure and handling, and you have to have management plans. It's a very big concern, and how you handle it regardless of what type of animal you have. However, when you have a big animal, that's a lot of poop. If you have a 1,400-pound animal, it's really a lot. When you cut that animal by a third of size, the output is significantly less. And so you're able to produce more that you get paid on per output of manure. If you're getting charges associated with phosphorus, like in Quebec, it really makes the Jersey breed attractive. They say that I believe it's a 40% lower footprint when you talk about greenhouse gases and phosphorus production.
And still getting paid on your component.
You're getting paid on your component. And that's the amazing thing. People think, well, how much better is it? And it's not about better, it's different. And I think that's really important to talk about. And that's that Jerseys naturally, it is a genetic, biologic factor. It is not something that is, you can change how your animals produce milk based on their feed and their feed efficiency. But naturally, Jerseys produce about 18 to 20% more protein than the average Holstein, and about 29-30% more fat. And if you're producing, 29 to 30% more fat per liter of milk, that's a significant amount. If I'm a Jersey producer, it's going to take me a lot less milk to get to my butter fat. So it's amazing. When I talk to producers, it can range anywhere from a 5% fat to 5.6, 5.7. So there are people who have these really amazing herds that are producing really high rates of butterfat. It's fantastic, and they get paid really, really well. And they have this easier to handle animal with great health.
Do you like what you're hearing from the Back 40? We'd like to hear from you. Send us an email with your comments and thoughts to theback40@trillionmutual.com or follow us on social media @TrillionMutual. Now, for our listeners that aren't familiar with the different breeds, where would you be looking at for a similar Holstein animal? What sort of percentage of butterfat would you see in that milk?
The average in 2019 if you take all the herds across Canada, for a Holstein, the fat production is about 3.97. A Jersey, the average was 5. Often in dairy, we talk by hectoliters, so 100 liters of milk. In 100 liters of milk, you're going to have 5.1 kilos of butterfat. In 100 hectoliters of Holstein milk, you're only going to have about 3.97, right? So that's a significant amount. That's how you get paid. You get paid on your butterfat and your protein, because those are the tangibles. They're not the water. We're not paying for water. Farmers get paid for the tangibles in their milk. And the next one is the protein. And so the difference between protein is about 0.5% or a little bit more. So the average Holstein produces about 3.24% protein in the liter of milk versus a Jersey, which is 3.84. Now, those numbers are fairly steady. Protein doesn't really change that much. It's a lot harder to be influenced by what you're feeding your animals. But what you feed your animals and the efficiency of your animals is also dependent on your feed. If you have the right nutritional balance for your animals, the percentage of fat that you can produce per liter of milk in a Jersey can go well beyond 5.1.
I would think that when you get into Western Canada, where the distances you have to travel in order to get to a processor can be quite a bit more than they are in Ontario here, I would think that would be a fair advantage then for a Jersey cow, just simply from a transportation cost.
Absolutely. First of all, transportation, every farmer bears the cost of transportation. They pay for the transportation of their product to the processor. And so it gets deducted. And so that's definitely a forefront of every producer's mind. When you're shipping milk, you want to get paid on whatever you're shipping. You want to ship the densest product, I guess is the best way to say it. A Jersey naturally produces a denser product. There is more butterfat and more protein per liter that you are shipping. Realistically, the other thing we have to think about is, what does the market want? It's predicted that within the next 5 years, that the demand for the solids in milk will be about 80% of the milk. So right now, that's not the balance, but they're predicting only about 20% of the milk will be consumed in its fluid form. So in liquid milk, creams, that sort of thing. The other 80% will be transformed into other products. So the yogurts, the ice cream, the cheese, especially the cheese, all of those other types of products. So that's where we're going. So it's the quote unquote components, that the bits and pieces that we can't see in the milk, the non-water part, which is the valuable part of the milk. And that is the demand in our marketplace right now. And so jerseys are the perfect solution to be serving the marketplace with the products that they have a desire for.
Now, we've heard a lot in the news over the past couple of years about different trade deals that have seriously affected the dairy industry. And one of the issues that we run across is that we use a lot more of the fat than we do of the skimmed milk. And the skim milk tends to be something that we have left over. We go to sell that on world markets. That creates all sort of trade issues. Would a switch to more Jersey cattle in Canada help with that?
Absolutely. Switching to Jersey cattle would help in a lot of ways. And, I'm not biased at all here.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Not at all. But I think realistically, it's about producing the product that meets the market. And that is what's unique about our market with a managed market. A lot of people really, it's really confusing how our market works, but we're really trying to supply by managing a market, regardless of what breed of cattle it is, and getting the product that fills the marketplace the way that it needs to be filled. The unique thing about jerseys is they're poised as a breed to naturally produce, without a whole lot of intervention, to produce the product that is exactly what consumers want. Jerseys are a really great solution. And there's been really big changes recently to deal with those skim milk overages. So structural surpluses is kind of the technical word for it. But basically what's left over, because we forget that what is left over once you use the protein and the fat is what they call lactose and other solids. So those are the milk sugars, the minerals. What do you do with them? And some of that leftover protein. And so you can turn it into skim milk powder. It's a very low value product. But with a lot of the trade agreements, we've been capped on what we can put into the marketplace. And realistically, farmers don't want it going there either. It's not worth much. So they're not getting bang for their buck either. By supplying the market with what it needs and what it uses is best for everybody, because it means that they're going to get top dollar for their product and we're not going to have any structural overages. So there's been some changes in the eastern part of Canada, so Ontario and East, and farmers are starting to get paid on basically supplying. If they are targeting the balance of protein and fat that our marketplace uses, they get paid better. They don't get paid as well if they're not meeting that demand. The hope is that that will balance things out. But it also means that it's increasingly attractive to have jerseys in your herd. And we're seeing a lot of mixed herds. That's something people don't talk about. People think of this purity idea that, you have a black and white herd or you have a brown herd. But that's not the case. More and more, we're seeing mixed herds. And people think, well, how are jerseys going to hold their own? They're wee. They're just little in comparison. But you know what? They're pretty bossy.
They
tough. Hold their own. They do. They have no problem nosing in there and getting in some feed or anything else. So they're great in a mixed herd.
Any issues with the difference in size and how the barns are constructed, or do they tend to look after that on their own?
They look after that on their own. What's an interesting thing, and I had never heard, and this is why I love my job and being able to talk to different producers. They feed you with little tidbits that you hear, and one of the gentlemen said, now in Ontario and Quebec and this part of the country, a lot of our barns are still tie stall, which means that
Yeah.
each individual cow has their own stall. And in Waterloo County, where I live, we have a lot of old school barns that were built, in the 1930s, bank barns, that sort of thing. They're great because you can get more Jerseys into one of these older barns than you can Holsteins, because Holsteins are really tall. They're really big.
Yep.
The other thing is that as farmers move to a freestall, so that's where cows can go wherever they feel like, lay down wherever they want, we're finding that Jerseys do really, really well in free stalls. Part of it is because they're very sure-footed, because they're smaller in stature. They also have harder hooves. Their hooves are black, and foot problems are a major issue for cattle. They get pedicures all the time. That's something most people don't know, but foot health is really, really important. And the steadiness of their feet and the health of their feet is going to have impact on their production levels. And what farmers have found, and this farmer shared with me, he said, listen, Jerseys are perfect in a freestall barn. They're great in a tie stall, but they are fabulous in a freestall because they're sure-footed. They're smaller in stature. They're closer to the ground than a tall Holstein, and they've got these hard hooves, so they're good on concrete floors. If you've ever watched a cow, they're careful. They're careful on a concrete or a slippery floor. They have to be. They're a big animal. Jerseys do really, really well. And so old school barns, Jerseys are great in them. But in these newer, bigger barns where they are freestall, they can go where they wish, Jerseys are awesome. It's neat. They're very adaptable. On an international basis, the other thing we think about, our temperatures here can be cold, can be hot, can be anything in between. The really neat thing is that Jerseys, we see there's a real demand for them in hot and arid climates. They are actually incredibly adaptable and really do well in hot conditions as well. So it's kind of cool. They're a really adaptable animal.
With all that being said, where do you see the future of the Jersey cow 10, 15 years down the road there? We've seen a resurgence. Is that something we're going to continue to see?
I really, really do think we are, Mike. I really think that when we started talking about, those neat niche markets that the Jerseys really capitalized on way back in the 50s and early 60s, I think we're starting to see that people really, especially with the pandemic, people really wanted to be connected to their food. And more we are seeing independent processing places pop up. And more we're seeing small producers like Jerseys. We have a number actually of Jersey producers at Jersey Canada who are opening their own on-farm processing to do their milk, to do also specialty cheeses, ice cream, that sort of thing. We're seeing more and more of those. And Jerseys are really, really ideal for that. The other thing is the health benefits and the benefits that Jerseys are genetically more likely to be carriers of what we call the A2 gene. The A2 gene is something that's unique in terms of the protein production. So A2 proteins are more easily digestible by people who are sensitive to milk proteins. And so in places like Australia, there is actually about 20 to 30% of their market, I understand, is actually A2 milk alone. So you can actually, right now, even in Ontario, there are producers that have quote unquote A2 milk, and it's ideal for people who have sensitivities. As Jerseys are much more likely to be carriers of this gene, that is also a niche market. So I think realistically going forward, as we see an interest in people being connected to the production, being connected to the farm, knowing the source of their food and independent processors. Jerseys, because of their milk composition, they're really set up to be fantastic in terms of turning their milk into cheeses and other types of products that are dependent on the components like protein and fat. We also are seeing an increase in the demand for that protein and that butter fat. So of course it makes sense because we're paying our farmers more to give the products that are in demand. And so that definitely bodes well for the Jersey breed. And something we don't talk about much, but I think we're going to hear more and more, is the whole issue of sustainability and our environmental impact. I think that's something we all need to keep in mind. And I know that you often hear about animal agriculture and in terms of, well, its pressures on the environment. Jerseys are a breed that, given its lower size, its efficiency in turning that input, that grass, that hay, the TMR, turning that into the finished product, they are an incredibly efficient conversion animal. They turn that food into usable product in a really efficient manner. Their impact in terms of their carbon dioxide, their phosphorus production is lower. I think we see an animal which is poised to be a really good choice in an environment where people are concerned about selecting products which have a lower environmental impact. People don't want to give up their ice cream. I know I'm not giving up my butter.
I'm not giving up mine.
I am not giving up. I am a cheese lover. I don't know what I do without cheese, but I'm very environmentally concerned and I'm very thoughtful about the choices that I make. But I also always choose Canadian because we know that we have some of the highest standards in the world when it comes to agricultural production, especially our dairy. We have incredible standards. I really do. I believe that it's a kind of an exciting time because I think jerseys are poised to be an animal to be chosen. They inherently are very healthy. They have great feet. That's going to mean less need for antimicrobials. And we know everybody's concerned. If we don't have to introduce antimicrobials medicine, we don't want to do that. Consumers are concerned with that. We want to have an animal that's efficient. Well, we got that. Check. Jerseys are that. We want animals that are productive. We know that jerseys are very, very healthy and are excellent reproducers. They are low intervention. They quote unquote catch. They're good at becoming pregnant, being healthy, have easy pregnancies and births. They have longevity. They are able to stay in a herd a really long time. They are healthy, easy keepers, and their environmental impact is lower. And I think all of those factors put together puts the Jersey breed just that they're unique. There's something really special. And that's something I hear from a lot of producers and breeders is that they're very proud of the fact that the Jersey genetics are old. They go back a long way to the Jersey Islands and they're unique. They are not the same. The genetics of a Holstein is not the same as the genetics of a Jersey. They are a unique breed unto themselves, and they have some really, really interesting features that I think are going to be in high demand as we move forward in the world that we're in right now.
I know many of the things that you listed off there as factors that may result in more jerseys in Canada are the same things that attracted my dad to the breed and the things that he loved about them as well. At the end of the day, though, he really did like those Jersey cows. The herd that he had, he was very, very proud of. And I know he'd be thrilled to know that that the numbers are back to where they were from the year that I was born. We're back to that stage again, and he would be thrilled to see that happen in Canada. If people want to find out more information about Jersey Canada, where can they find that?
You can come to our website, and our website is www.jerseycanada.com, or you're welcome to give us a call. You can call us here at the office, 519-821-1020, anytime you wish. We've got lots of friendly people here. We have bilingual staff. We serve North America. Anybody who's got questions, we have some really amazing people on our team here who are really awesome resources. We have one of our staff members who's been with us for 20 years. Phyllis has been around. She knows everybody, and it's pretty awesome. We've got a great team here.
Krista, it's been great to have a chance to talk to you. Thank you for being part of the Back 40. We've been talking to Krista Cressman, General Manager of Jersey Canada.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Join us next time when our guest will be Mark Bevan from EthoGuard, and we will be talking about cybersecurity on your farm. You've been listening to The Back 40, brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe.